It's very important to understand personnel, both offensively and defensively, because it tells us who is on the field, which sets the tone and is the first indicator that tells us what each side of the ball is trying to do. And the first thing to understand is that the offense controls personnel. The defense must match it for whatever its reason is. That could be a personnel matchup, it could be down in distance. It depends on the situation. But the defense cannot be stubborn and put six defensive backs on the field if the offense is in 23 personnel with two backs and three tight ends. It would struggle to stop the run, obviously. So, one of the first goals in offensive philosophy and game planning is to schematically create personnel mismatches, and the defense's job is to counter that. The offense will do this by utilizing players who can align in locations on the field that are abnormal to the player's position, like a running back lining up out wide as a wide receiver, or a wide receiver lining up in the backfield, or a tight end lining up as a wide receiver, so on and so forth. If the offense presents us with, say, 12 personnel, one back, two tight ends, and two receivers, like you see in this picture, this is how a defense would usually match it. You'd have your two safeties, your two corners, your two defensive ends, your nose, and your tackle. And then your fifth player could either be a down lineman or he could be a linebacker. That's usually the Sam. And then your other two linebackers are the Mike and the Will. The Will is to the opposite side of the Sam, usually the weak side, the Sam as the strong linebacker. And again, that Sam could be a down lineman or he could align back as a linebacker. Either way, that's usually called base defense with this personnel on the field. Now, if the offense takes out their second tight end, that U, and puts in a slot receiver, they went from 12 to 11 personnel. The defense could stay in base and move their Sam out there to match that slot receiver, but usually the defense will take the Sam out, who's a linebacker body, and put in a defensive back called the nickel. The nickel being the fifth defensive back, hence why it's called nickel, 5 cents, 5 DBs. And oftentimes in sub packages where you're subbing a nickel in for a Sam, a defense will call their will linebacker a dime linebacker. It could be the same exact person, but on paper, instead of a will, he's a dime. But in dime personnel, usually on third and long, obvious passing downs, or if the offense goes to 10 personnel, or if the tight end is a very significant receiving threat, the defense would rather have 6 defensive backs out there. So in dime personnel, they take the linebacker who's playing will or dime out, and they put a defensive back in to play that dime linebacker. So on paper, there's no change, but the body, the person playing that dime linebacker is a defensive back. So you have 6 defensive backs on the field, the 2 corners, the 2 safeties, the nickel, and the dime. So you have your base, then you have your nickel when you put that 5th defensive back out there, who is playing the nickel position. And then dime personnel is when a defensive back is playing the dime position. So let's take a look at this defensive personnel chart, just so you have a better understanding. Base defense for most teams is either 5 down linemen, end, nose, tackle, end, plus the Sam, who you could think of as a 5th down lineman. Then you have your 2 linebackers, Mike and Will, and then your 4 defensive backs. This is good against 12 and 21 personnel. Again, other teams, their base defense is a 4-3-4. So 4 down linemen, end, nose, tackle, and then that other end is sometimes called a jack, a buck, a rush. But regardless of what they call him, you have 4 down linemen, and then you have your 3 linebackers. This is also used against 12 and 21 personnel. Again, the primary difference between some teams' base defense and other teams' base defense is that Sam linebacker. Some teams, he's always off the ball. Other teams, he could be on or off the ball. So whether you want to view it as a 5-2 or a 4-3. Either way, a versatile team could get into either out of their base, but some just stick with 3 linebackers off the ball no matter what. And then you have your nickel personnel, your 4 down linemen, 2 linebackers. That dime could technically be a will, but usually he's called a dime in a sub-package defense. And then your Sam is out of the game, and the nickel goes in for him. So a 4-2-5, this is good for 11 personnel, sometimes 10 personnel as well. Then you have your dime personnel, still have your 4 down linemen, and now your Mike and dime are still on the field, but the dime is a different person. So it's just the Mike that's a linebacker body, and now a defensive back is playing the dime position. So this is a 4-1-6 from a personnel standpoint. This is good against 10 personnel, and then it's good against 11 personnel if it's an obvious passing down, 2nd and long, 3rd and medium to long. You'll see teams go dime pretty often. And those are the most common defensive personnels. There are some one-offs that you see. There's quite a few personnels, but one that we'll cover right now is called penny. This is 5 down linemen, 1 linebacker, and 5 defensive backs. So this is a pretty unique package where you have 5 true linemen, you have your 1 linebacker, and then your 5 DBs. It's not as common, but it's pretty universally called penny, I would assume, because of the uniqueness of the sole 1 linebacker. Even in dime, that DB is usually aligned as a linebacker. In penny, there's only 1 person who can align as a linebacker. And there's not really a specific offensive personnel this is great for. This is more defensive personnel based, but nonetheless, it's there, and that's what it's called. And then you have your goal line and heavy packages, which there are multiple variations of, but one, for example, is now 6 down linemen because you're in 4th and short, 3rd and short, or you're at the goal line, and then you have your 3 linebackers and now only 2 DBs. But again, there are multiple variations of this. You could have a 7th defensive lineman out there, or you could have 3 DBs and 2 linebackers. There's different ways to do it, but the point is there is now a 6th defensive lineman at least on the field for short yardage or goal line situations against 13, 22, anything that's a heavy offensive personnel. In the way that defenses structure their playbook installs, oftentimes their base playbook is one specific playbook, and then there's sub packages, which is always going to be nickel and dime for any given team. That might be a separate playbook because it's structurally different, especially different from that top base with 5, quote, down linemen. Now you only have 4 down linemen. So it's a different structure, requires different play calls. Penny, same thing. That could be grouped into a base playbook or a sub-package playbook. Sub meaning you're substituting the nickel and the dime. So a nickel and dime penny could be grouped into that, but is usually not going to be because you have 5 down linemen. And then your goal line and heavy packages are going to have their own separate playbook with different calls than the base and sub-package ones as well. And it's critical for each player to understand the full defensive concept because there are times where the defense doesn't strategically match the offensive personnel. So nickel, for example, you see Mikey Sainristil, who was an elite nickel for Michigan. He played corner and base, but on this specific play that everyone remembers, he was playing nickel covering a tight end. Usually you have a Sam covering a tight end, but they stayed in nickel on the passing down to have a faster defensive back covering the tight end in the pass game rather than having a linebacker covering the tight end in the passing game. Thanks for watching. You can check out the offensive personnel video here. Don't forget to like and subscribe.